treadmill to the end of the term, as I'm sure all your classes are. One of the unfortunate things of people who don't time themselves very well. So we were looking here about around page 60, where Pahushka, I guess it's Pahushka, but I can't say it very well, so I say Pahushka. It's probably Pahushka. Who's Pahushka?
That's her
Why?
long hair.
Long hair. And Buffalo Bill later on is Pahushka too. Long hair. And what drove the Wasichus into the Black Hills, according to this old the yellow metal that drives the Wasichus crazy? It's probably got some truth to it. If I threw some little gold nuggets out in the middle of this class, you probably all come jump up and start, going all around the floor to grab something. So, in fact, he's probably not far off the mark on that, I guess. And by the way, just because your hue is different from another hue, don't think you're not a Wasichu. Generally, the term is applied to all of us who are involved in whatever we did in this country relative to the Native Americans, even though our ancestors, most of them, probably weren't even here. I mean, my ancestors weren't here, and I'm sure they weren't involved in it, but probably most of yours too. It's a cultural thing. Anyway, Pahushka announced it in a voice that went everywhere. What's that?
Telegraph.
The telegraph had already been invented. It's a pretty good description of it. And of course, this is a famous line. Later, he got rubbed out for doing that. Rubbed out, wiped out. So, we called Red Cotton's people to hang around the fort Indians. Good expression. Hang around the fort. They used to hang around the fort. Red Cloud had made peace. Where does he stand on this? He's somewhere in the middle. He's not for or against peace, but he is related to Crazy Horse, who is in fact again coming in. So this is 1875, the year before Little Bighorn. And there was a Sundance there at Soldiers Town, and two of them danced together. One of them lost a leg in the Battle of the Hundred, one of them lost an eye in attacking the wagons. We boys went down the creek while they were sundancing, got some elm tree leaves, chewed them up, threw them at the dances while they were dressed up trying to look their best. I guess these things are kind of prickly, perhaps. So they were just causing trouble. Anyway, we heard that the grandfather in Washington wanted to lease the Black Hills so they could dig for gold. And then he gets into Crazy Horse. Page 63 there. There were some hanging around the fort people with us, and when they saw that we were going to join Crazy Horse, they left and started back to Soldiers Town. They were afraid they might be trouble, and they knew Crazy Horse would fight. So it is pretty good to see. So he talks about Crazy Horse, his cousin, on the next page or so. I was anxious to see my cousin Crazy Horse again. Of course, I had seen him now and then ever since I can remember, and heard stories of the brave things he did. I remember once he was out with his brother alone on horseback. A big band of crows. What are crows? Another Indian group from a hostile to the Sioux. They're not birds. Actually, if you go up to Custer's battlefield, you'll see the Crows actually keep that agency there. They have a motel right next to the battlefield. You'll stay in a Crow motel because they have that area. The Crows work more with the Americans than the Sioux. And when he went to back, his brother's horse was down, and the crows were almost on him, and they told him how Crazy Horse charged back into the crows and fought back with only bow and arrows and took his brother up behind him and got away. It was the sacred power that made the crows afraid of him when he charged. So these are some good stories about Crazy Horse. Our father's father, Crazy Horse's father was my father's cousin. There were no chiefs in our family before Crazy Horse, but there were holy men. And he became a chief because of the power he got in the vision when he was a boy. He too had a vision when he was a boy. When I was a man, my father told me something about that vision. Of course, he did not know all of it, but he said that Crazy Horse dreamed that he went into the spirit, into the world where there is nothing but the spirit of all things. That is the real world that is behind the present one. And everything we see here is something like a shadow from that world. He was on his horse in that world, and the horse and himself on it, and the trees and the grass and the stones, and everything were made of spirit, and nothing was hard. Everything seemed to float. His horse was standing still there, and yet danced around like a horse made only of shadow. And that's how he got his name, which does not mean that his horse was crazy or wild, but that in his vision it danced around in that peculiar way. That's a great little vignette, don't you think? And so you wouldn't get something like that if you didn't read the book. And that's why I think reading books are good. I mean, someone can lecture you on something, oh, Crazy Horse doesn't mean Crazy Horse, it's a vision he got, you know. But this, if you don't read for yourself, you don't really get some of these really nice things. You say, well, what do I need them for? Well, you don't, I suppose. You prefer to listen to Eminem, go ahead, you know. If that's the comparison that one might make. Or you want to hear some rapper talk about some other rubbish, etc. I mean, you make choices in life with what you want to fill your brain with. So occasionally it pays to fill it with something elegant, I think, and not just something low, all constant barrage of something really scummy. So yeah, I mean, that's really, I think, an elegant little vignette there. So that's, I think, the reason for it. So if anyone asks you why you do this, just tell them, give them the answer I just gave you. It was this vision that gave him his great power. So when he went into a fight, he'd only think of the world to be in it again, that spirit world. And that's why nothing could hurt him. That's why he'd go through anything and not be hurt. Until he was murdered by the Wasichus in Soldiers Town on White River. He had only been wounded twice. Once by accident, and both times by someone of his own people when he was not expecting trouble and was not thinking about it, never by an enemy. When he was 15, he was wounded by accident, and the other time, when he was a young man, another man was jealous of him because the man's wife liked Crazy Horse. Apparently he took someone's wife, or someone's wife wanted to be in his teepee, and the man charged in and shot him or stabbed him or wounded him or something like that. They used to say too that he carried a sacred stone with him, like the one he had seen in his vision, that when he was in danger, the stone always got very heavy and protected him somehow. They used to say that's the reason no horse he ever rode lasted very long. I don't know about these things. Maybe people only thought it, but it's a fact that he never kept one horse long. They wore out. I think it was only the power of his great vision that made him great. So everyone felt that way about him, that he was a queer man. He doesn't mean by queer what you might think he means. He means odd, peculiar. And that back when this book was written, queer didn't mean what we now impute to him. He would joke in his own teepee, and when he went on his own warpath with a small party, he would joke to make the warriors feel good. He's picture's quite an impressive person, don't you think? Really, it's a great picture. I mean, wherever you get this, you wouldn't get this picture. Well, again, what do you need it? You say, well, I think it enlarges your life and makes it a richer life to know these. So on and so forth. He was a very great man. I think if the Wasichus had not murdered him there, maybe we should have the Black Hills and be happy. They could not kill him in battle. They had to lie to him and murder him. And he was only about 30 years old when he died. I forget the circumstances, but they brought him into the fort after the little bighorn and his people were starving, and he came in finally because of his people that were out there. You know, the Indians had to have their families and their wives and children with them when they were doing these things. They weren't a professional army, so they had responsibilities. So even if they could fight a good battle here or there, they'd always be, you know, weighted down with their family. So sooner or later, that would determine things. So when he was desperate, the people, it was winter and they were being hunted, they were starving, he had to come in. And there was a scuffle or something in the guardhouse at the Fort Robinson where he was taken in, and they were trying to disarm him. He didn't want to give up his arms. I think a soldier bayoneted him in the back. And that was, that's what he's bitter about here. But you see, what I'm trying to say from the beginning here is his bitterness is not as, not the kind of bitterness you feel in reading James Baldwin or Malcolm X. He kind of accepts this as part of the world, and he protests about it, but it doesn't depress him to that extent, I think. He still feels that there's something for him to, you know, to contribute, to live, to do things. It's, he has that kind of a very buoyant spirit, I think. That's, again, from my standpoint, what I've been trying to recommend in reading these things, that you should let your spirit be buoyant if you can, accepting the fact that adversity happens to a lot of people, and maybe you more than others, but still. Well, okay. I got to move along here. I would love to read this all out loud as much as I could. Chapter 8, The Fight with 3 Stars. I just wanted to get you into these things. These are great, great narratives here. I think you're page 71 or so. When the Wasichus saw us, they put their wagons in a circle and got inside with their oxen, and we rode round and round them in a wide circle that kept getting narrower. This is the best way to fight because it's hard to hit ponies running fast in a circle. We always think that circling the wagons is the best way to fight. He's saying the best way to fight is to ride around the circle so they can't hit you. It's interesting. I can't read it all, but all these people get together. They were great men, for instance, page 72, like Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull and Gaul. These are Indian chiefs of that time. Hump, Spotted Eagle, Dull Knife. And this is their battle cry here. I can't say it myself. So they thought it was a good time to make a Sundance around that time. Scouts were sent out in all directions to guard the sacred place. So now here he describes Sundance for you. Sitting Bull, who was the greatest medicine man of the nation at the time, had charge of the dance. Purify the people and give them power. So Sitting Bull, you see, was not a war chief, like we think of him. He was a medicine man. War chief for people like Crazy Horse. We think, oh, Sitting Bull is the great Indian warrior. No, he's not an Indian warrior at all. He's a spiritual leader. He prepares the Sundance. Takes care of the families while there others are fighting. And he describes who takes part in this Sundance. The holy men go out and find a wakachun, a holy tree. I don't think this is much different from those of you who have Christmas trees. And I'm sure the tradition goes back to Central Asia someplace. Both traditions, Christmas trees and Sundance trees. I know that we like to think that our Christmas trees are unique or something like that, but they're really pagan, I wouldn't say symbols, but practices. I mean, Christmas is coming. What has Christmas to do with Jesus Christ? I mean, a Christmas tree. It has nothing whatever to do with Jesus Christ at all. It's a northern symbol, a northern tree. And obviously originally celebrated a northern rebirth of the sun festival of some kind. It's absolutely the same with reindeer and all the rest. But what a certain kind of Christianity did, not all kinds of Christianity, they were willing to absorb local symbols and amalgamate them. For instance, we'll see in the Lawrence book about the fish. Why is Jesus called the fish? And he'll explain to you all about what the fish meant in the pre-Christian world as a subterranean creature that, well, he'll explain it better than I. Lawrence is really good at that. And what's an Easter egg? Lawrence will explain the Easter egg to you too, because it's an Etruscan symbol of resurrection, but that's long before Christianity. It was in the pre-Christian world. It had to do with the resurrection, the egg symbolizing the resurrection. We just dye them now and have rolls of Easter eggs on the lawn of the White House, but people don't know what the symbols mean or why they came. But again, they're nothing to do with Christianity. Except that it became cosmopolitan religion. We all like those symbols. People love mistletoe, for instance. Once again, traditional, certainly Druid, English Druid pagan symbol. And these are the favorite trappings. These are the favorite trappings of these holidays. So when I say that this Sundance pole is like the Christmas tree, I think it probably goes back to similar roots. I don't know what in the prehistoric past, where they diverged. But they will go out and cut a tree, a holy tree, and bring it into the home. That's exactly what most of you folks have Christmas trees do. Again, I'm an expert on Palestinian culture and civilization from the time of Jesus in the Second Temple, and I can assure you there was nothing like a Christmas tree in that culture, or anything even resembling it. It's a totally northern, Siberian, European plains, if you like, nomadic custom. So we have young maidens come out singing with sharp axes. They chop a tree down. The sons of chiefs, carry the sacred tree home. When the holy tree is brought into the home, they set it in the center. Everyone starts dancing. Now from there on, the resemblance ceases, because it's sort of like dancing around the maypole in some cultures. This time it is going to be a dance around the maypole, if you like. They sing sacred songs and so on and so forth. But what do? It's on page 74, I think. The holy men pierced the ears of the little one and gave a pony away. The next day the dance began, and those who were going to take part were ready. They had been fasting and purifying themselves in the sweat lodges. First their bodies were painted by holy men, then each would lie down beneath the tree as though he was dead, and the holy men would cut a place in his back or chest so that a strip of rawhide could be fastened to the top of the tree. Fastened to the top of the tree could be pushed through his flesh and tied. Then the men would get up and dance to the drums, leaning back on the rawhide strip, as long as they could stand the pain or until the flesh tore loose. We're in a different universe here. So, how many want to do the Sundance? How many are ready for this one? I didn't get too many volunteers in any of my classes for this. So, I think if you were carried away in a communal setting, and if you wanted to show how brave you were, that you could take pain and so on, you would do it. You wouldn't do it? No, you wouldn't. I don't think the women did it, so I don't think you have to worry too much. We're talking about the young men who are about to go into battle here. I think get down to Fort Camp Pendleton, a place like that, they'd probably be ready for it, having been all hyped up and psyched up for this sort of thing. And we would gather sharp spear grass, and when a man came along without his shirt, we would stick him to see if it would make him cry out and make him worse. Also, we made pop guns out of young ash boughs and shot at the men and women. See, he humanizes these people, and he does it in a very good-natured way. Anyway, this is, I think, the dance that, I don't know where he says it, that Sitting Bull had his vision in. What was Sitting Bull's vision? Why were the Indians prepared to fight so hard against the cavalry? He says that he saw the vision of the cavalry dropping from the sky into the camp. And he took that to mean that the Great Spirit was giving them the cavalry, which is almost what happened. And so you can read this more carefully yourself. This is an earlier fight with 3 stars, who was not Custer. This is Crook, bigger general than Custer. Notice I, just for fun, line on page 79, I think it is here, he's describing the battle with the different Native American chap. The next morning, about 20 of us young fellows first started out to see where the fight had been. First we saw a dead horse without shoes. Then we saw a dead horse with shoes. And near this one was a soldier full of arrows. We got to where the soldier had camped after the fight. And there was a place where the ground was fresh. And under this blanket, they found another dead soldier tied up in the blanket. And then the 4th one was a black Wasichu. So, just so you know, I mean, this is a black-white enterprise. So, oh, well, they were using the blacks for this enterprise. Well, they were using the whites too. A soldier is someone who is used. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're black or white. You're a soldier, and you're doing it. I mean, the soldier is used, isn't he? I mean, you can't say, oh, you know, whatever you want to call the gringos or whatever, are using the black soldiers. Well, they're using the white soldiers too. I mean, when guys get killed in battle, they're all being get killed, and they're all getting, you know, in the army for the same pay, more or less, I think. And in this instance, that's what a soldier is. So I don't think that's a fair comment. You know, you're taking part. You're taking part. You know, everyone's taking part, no matter what color you are. And so we're all part of it, and everyone, you know, this is the legacy we have. The rubbing out of long hair, 80. Again, long hair is Custer. This is a really great chapter. This gives you the whole perspective of the battle here. He remembers his vision. Everyone painted themselves red. I think they made him stay home, take care for a while of the family, watch the horses on page 82. They even went swimming, and while they were doing this, the chargers are coming, the crier of the Oglala, the main Sioux tribe, yelled out. Then everyone went running to catch his horse, and we were lucky to have ours right there. My older brother was sorrel, and he rode away fast toward the Hunkpapas, another tribe. I had a buckskin. I had my 6-shooter too. And I could see big dust rising. So here's his battle. This is right in the middle of the battle here. Take courage, don't be a woman. Help us, we're out of breath. I think that was Gaul when he stopped the Hunkpapas from running away. And then the cry went up. It's sort of like the Iliad, if you read it by Homer, when Achilles comes on the battlefield. Crazy horse is coming! Crazy horse is coming! And so they, soldiers were running upstream, and we were all mixed there in the twilight. It didn't see much. Once I saw Lakota charging a soldier who stayed behind and fought. He was a brave man. Lakota took the soldier's horse by the bridle, but the soldier killed him with a 6-shooter. Soon the soldiers were all crowded into the river, many of the Lakotas too. I was in the water a while. Men and horses were all mixed up and fighting in the water, and it was like hell, falling in the river. And then they were out of the river, and people were stripping dead soldiers and putting the clothes on themselves. And there was a soldier on the ground, and he was still kicking. A Lakota rode up and said, "Boy, get off, scalp him." And I got off and started to do it, and he had short hair, and my knife was not sharp, and he ground his teeth, and I shot him in the forehead and got his scalp. Tough stuff, huh? Many of our warriors were following the soldiers up the hill on the other side of the river. Everybody else was turning down the stream. I thought I should show my mother my scalp, so I rode over toward the hill where there was a crowd of women and children. Well, it goes on like that. You can read this yourself. I just wanted to try to make you, to get you into it. I hope that helps get you into it. Does that help? It makes it a little more interesting, huh? So you know what's in here, and you can find out that it's not just pile of rubbish or something like that. Part of the way up, we met another Lakota. He was on his foot, and he was bleeding and dizzy. He would get up, and he would fall down again. So we really have a tremendous picture here of the battle, I think. Different groups, different Indian witnesses. The women, the soldiers were all rubbed out there. The women swarmed up the hill, began stripping the soldiers. They were yelling and laughing and singing. I saw something funny. Two fat old women, I guess this is page 95 or something, 94. Were stripping a soldier who was wounded and lying dead, and when they had him naked, they began to cut something off that he had, and he jumped up and began fighting with the two fat women. He was swinging one of them around while the other was trying to stab him with her knife. And after a while, another woman rushed up and shoved her knife into him, and he died really dead. And it was funny to see the naked Wasichu fighting with the fat women. This is crazy stuff. Really, you won't get this in you won't get this in Time magazine or so. Anyone, I urge you to read it. I would love to read you the whole book, obviously. Okay, well, that evening after everything was over, they heard more soldiers were coming. And he said, I'll sing some of our kill songs. We had kill dances all night long. I'll sing some of our kill songs for you that our people made and sang that night. Here's one. I'll sing you a kill song. I think this is a funny kill song that ends the chapter. I don't know. This is, long hair has never returned, so his woman is crying, crying. Look over here, she cries. Long hair, guns I had none, you brought me many. I thank you, you make me laugh. Long hair, horses I had none, you brought me many. I thank you, you make me laugh. Long hair, where he lives nobody knows, crying they seek him, he lies over here. Let go your holy guns, you're not men enough to do any harm. Let go your holy guns. And after a while I got so tired of dancing that I went to sleep on the ground right where I was. My cousin Black Wasichu died that night. Well, we stayed in the country near the Bighorn Mountains for about a moon, maybe a little more. My father told me all about the fighting, and he had, that all the fighting had not done any good because the hang around the fort people were getting ready to sell the Black Hills to the Wasichus anyway. We traveled to the Rosebud and camp. We moved on downstream, had a long sun dance before where we'd had the long sun dance before the rubbing out of long hair. Sitting Bull and Goal 101 left and started for Grandmother's Land. Where's Grandmother's Land? Canada. Why is it Grandmother's Land? Queen Victoria is the Queen of England. And she owns Canada. And she's grandmother. Okay? Let's see. Wherever we went, the soldiers came to kill us, 102. 104, then the people noticed that Crazy Horse was queer than ever. He hardly ever stayed in the camp. People found him out alone. People wondered if he ate anything at all. By the way, when Crazy Horse went into battle, he went into battle naked. He only he only painted his body with white round spots all over his body. Imagine if you were a Union soldier. Some guy was coming down on you naked, dressed only with white spots, come crashing down on you with as fast as he could go on some horse. You might think you were dealing with a crazy spirit too. Right? And guess he didn't fight much in the winter time. That's only for spring and summer battles, I guess. But those people only fought in the spring and summer, I think. Some of you are enjoying this. I see you smiling. My God, that's good. He was always a queer man, but that winter he was morose, I think. He was depressed because nothing had been achieved. He's only 14 years old when all this is completed. There were soldiers and Lakota policemen at the end of this chapter, the Black Road, all around home, all around him when he surrendered there at Soldierstown. I saw him take off his war bonnet. This is Crazy Horse. I was not near enough to hear what he said. He did not talk loud. He said only a few words. I was 14 years old. And this great sadness descends on everything. And he talks about 109, the events, how Crazy Horse was killed. I guess here it is. The evening the next day after we got back to Red Cloud's agency, I can't find stuff not to read here. He was riding his horse along the way ahead. They did not stay there long. They went on over to Soldierstown. When he got over there, we could see Crazy Horse because we couldn't see him because there were soldiers and Lakotas, policemen all around him. We had the feeling something bad was happening. We hear voices, then I heard a loud cry, and our own language said, "Don't touch me, I am Crazy Horse." And suddenly something went through all the people like a big wind, like strikes many trees at once. And somebody in there yelled something else, but nobody around me was asking or telling everybody what had happened. I heard that Crazy Horse was killed, that he was sick, that he was hurt, and I was frightened. And then everything got quiet. People began to break up, move around. I heard that Crazy Horse was, I guess, wounded. But it was not long before we all knew what had happened because some of the people saw it happen, and I'll tell you how it was. They told Crazy Horse they would not harm him in Soldierstown, and they was to talk to the Wasatch chief. But they lied. They did not take him to the chief for a talk. They took him to the little prison with iron bars on the windows. So they planned to get rid of him. And when he saw what they were doing, he turned around, took a knife out of his robe, and started out against all the soldiers. That little big man who had been his friend and was the one who told us boys that we were brave before my first fight when we attacked the wagons on War Bonnet Creek, took hold of Crazy Horse from behind and tried to get the knife away. While they were struggling, a soldier ran a bayonet into Crazy Horse from one side of the back, and he fell down and began to die. Then they picked him up and carried him into the soldiers' chief's office. The soldiers stood all around and would not let anyone in and made the people go away. Crazy Horse was dead. He was brave, good, and wise. He never wanted anything but to save his people. He was only 30. They could not kill him in battle. They had to lie to him and kill him that way. I cried all night, and so did my father. And then he describes how Crazy Horse's parents go and bury him. And they take him in a sling up this White Pepper Creek place. And nobody knows where they took his body to this day. So if you can go and find where they buried Crazy Horse, maybe you could get a big shrine going. You got the start for it right in this book. If you want to go look for where Crazy Horse was taken by the parents. I don't know where is that. Maybe they hid the body somewhere on Pepper Creek over there because the hunters had seen them, and maybe they went back again at night and took the box away into the Badlands. Crazy Horse might be lying over there just a little way from us right now on Pepper Creek across the hill yonder. I don't know. Grandmother's land. So he was 15 that year, and they go with Sitting Bull's people up to Canada here. I can't read all of this. Then he's really depressed about things, and in chapter 14 he remembers his vision when he is a youth, and he does his horse dance to cheer the people up. That's the choreography of the horse dance, and has some other visions here. The dog vision. 17, for instance, is one of the little drawings here. After the Hayoka ceremony, I came to live here, where I now am at Wounded Knee. Others came too and made these little grass houses, gray houses of logs you see are there square. It's bad, no way to live. There's no power in a square. You've noticed that everything Indian does is a circle. And that's because the power of the world always works in circles, and everything tries to be round. In the old days when we were a strong and happy people, it's page 150, I think. All our power came to us from the sacred hoop, the nation, and so long as the hoop was unbroken, the people flourished. The flowering tree was the living center of the hoop, and the circle of the four quarters nourished it. And the east gave peace and light, the south gave warmth, the west gave rain, the north cold, mighty wind. This knowledge came to us from the outer world with our religion. Everything the power of the world does is done in a circle. And so on. So here's him, his signature, I guess. This is his name, blackout here. Even the seasons form a circle and come back again. The life of man is a circle from childhood to childhood. Our teepees are around in a nest like a circle, And these were always set in a circle. The nation's hoop, a nest of many nests. But the Wasichus have put us in this square houses. Our power is gone. We are dying, for the power is not in us anymore. You look at our boys and see how it is with us. When we were living by the power of the circle in the way we should, boys were men at 12 or 13. Now it takes much longer. So he is a bit downcast. He describes his elk ceremony here further along. And then in chapter 19, 164, he describes, this is already 6 years later, he's still a young person, but he's old enough to go to Europe with Buffalo Bill. And that fall, the last of the bison herds were slaughtered by the Wasichus. Why did they slaughter the bison herds? Partly for the railroad to feed the workers, but then they just went out and did it gratuitously. That just not for the railroad. They just slaughtered them for piles and piles of bison, partly to send the skins back east, partly just to be meat, partly to settle the land because they wanted to make farms and cattle ranches out of it. Can't have crazy herds of buffalo running around in the middle of all that. I mean, there must have been, at least 3 million bison. They just killed them all. It's terrible, but again, we're the beneficiaries. We have freeways running through all these places. You can't have freeways running through bison herds so easily, you know. So you all say, oh, this is terrible, and I'm not making fun of you all. I'm just stating the fact, and yet we all benefit. So you have to think about that. What's your role in it? What's your responsibility? You know, you have to accept that we all bear a certain amount of responsibilities for it. And even if it could be different, we probably wouldn't put the cost back because we probably wouldn't be living where we're living. It's tough question. It's really tough. You know. One just tries to make the best compromise with it one can. But the cruelty was something incredible. More and more Wasichus came to kill them until there were only heaps of bones scattered where they used to be. The Wasichus didn't kill them to eat. They killed them for the metal that makes them crazy, and they took the hides to sell. Sometimes they didn't even take the hides, only the tongues. And I've heard that fireboats came down the Missouri River loaded with dried bison tongues. You can see that men who do that are crazy. So, you know, he just feels that. You know. Not like Malcolm X or James Baldwin. These men are just crazy. He kind of laughs to himself in a way. They just killed and killed because they like to do that. When we hunted bison, we killed them when we needed it. When there was nothing left but heaps of bones, the Wasichus came and gathered up the bones and sold them. Make soap. And all our people know now we're settling down in the square houses. Well, one of the reasons that was done, not in the Civil War, generals like Sherman and others, who later became the head of the defense ministry after Lincoln was killed and others became the head of the country. These people all had learned that the only way to fight war was total war. And they learned in the Georgia, South Carolina campaign and in the Shenandoah Valley campaign that if you made total war, that's it, destroyed all the railroads, destroyed all the crops, you know, made the people, all the people suffer, not just the soldiers suffer. You took the will to fight out of the people. And they just applied their lessons, good or bad, and I'm not excusing them. They're men, they're human beings, like all of us. They just took the lessons that they learned in the Civil War and used them against the Indians on the plains. I think that really explains the policy, actually. They just had learned this kind of fighting in the Civil War and felt that this is the only way to stop this whole thing. And they just were very ruthless men. They were effective men. They were very ruthless men. But they had seen a lot of horrible killing themselves, you know. When they've been through the calls with people like Sherman and Sheridan, all these kind of people. So there's no, you know, you can look at it and look at all the sides and try to weigh it yourself. I thought of my great vision was to save the nation's hoop. That's his great vision. And make the holy tree bloom in the center of it. And I felt like crying, for the sacred hoop was broken. In any case, in 1886, in my 23rd summer, there came up some Wasichus who wanted a band of Oglalas for a big show the other Pahuska was having. The other Pahuska was Buffalo Bill. And they were going to go across the big water. And maybe if I could see the great water of the Wasichus, I could understand how to bring the sacred hoop together, I thought, 165, and make the tree bloom again. The show people sent wagons from Rushville and the Iron Road to get us. So he describes this whole thing. That evening, where the big wagons were waiting for us on the Iron Road, we had a dance. That's the railroad. To get on the railroad. Then we rode all along all night again and came to a bigger town, Chicago. We stayed all day and all night, and right there I could compare my people's ways to Wasichu's ways, and this made me sadder than even before. I wished and wish I had not gone away from home. Anyway, then they get to New York, I think. We made shows, many Wasichus all winter. Talked about the nation's hoop being broken again. They would take everything from each other if they could, and so there were some who had more of everything than they could use, talking about the city in America. While crowds of people had nothing at all, and maybe even were starving. They had forgotten the earth was their mother. Men pointed guns at prisoners and made them move around like animals in a cage, and this made me feel very sad because my people too were penned up in islands. Maybe that was the way the Wasichus were going to treat them. So for the Wasichus, even the grass was penned up. They fenced in and everything. Then they put us all on a very big fireboat. I was really frightened. There were other big fireboats. What's this? Going across the Atlantic. Then there was water, water, water everywhere. And it was thundering, and we were so frightened. Afterwards, the Wasichus came and gave us things to tie around us so we could float. And they gave them all life jackets. I didn't put it on me. I did not want to float. I dressed for death. I put on my best clothes, which I wore in the show, and I sang my death song. Others dressed for death, too, because it was the end of our lives. We could not fight. This was going to kill us. Anyway, the waves were as big as mountains. I've been on the Atlantic Ocean. That is true. You get in the bad time of the Atlantic Ocean, you've never seen waves so big and so frightening, really. Though the worst waves I ever saw were on the Indian Ocean. I mean, these were waves, and, you know, you go up like this, and then boom, like that. The whole boat would like go, you'd think the whole thing was going to fall to pieces. Don't go across the Indian Ocean in the monsoon. never forget that. There wasn't a person who wasn't sick on the boat except me, of course. I get sick on boats. Others do, but I don't. Anyway, he tells all about going to Europe and how Bahushka helps him come home. He gets sick. He's living with a French woman in Paris, actually, who's taking care of him, so he's having an interesting time. I can't read much more than this. I want to go on to the other, but the Messiah is on chapter 21. So you really should read this whole thing. It's really interesting. How many don't think this book is interesting? Well, you can say you don't, but you know, I would be saddened, and so you don't say it to me. But hope you don't sell this book back to the bookstore at the end of the term. You want to keep some things for yourself in life. If you sell your math books, your speech books, your whatever else is that they lab book or whatever, you can sell that back. Don't sell a good piece of literature back. Okay. So this is about this Messiah person, which we spoke about earlier. His name was Jack Wilson, 179. He was called Wovoka. He came from California, I think up by Lone Pine. Anyway, his whole thing was that if you danced, you could dance the people back again, dance the buffalo back to life. It was the spring of 1890s, and the Wasichus would disappear. He was coming to the Indians this time. There would not be any Wasichus in the New World that would come like a cloud in the whirlwind and crush the old earth with time. Well, anyway, they had this Sundance everywhere, and the cavalry, including the black Wasichu soldiers, got trigger happy at this place out in Moody and blew everybody away in this one incident. And it was in this period that they killed Sitting Bull too, the same as they had killed Crazy Horse, because they felt Sitting Bull inspired Indians or was involved in it. They brought him in and he got killed. And by this time, Black Elk can't take anymore. When I saw this, I wish I had died. He said, this is the butchering of wounded knee. And that goes on to the end of the dream. For instance, further along, I was a little in doubt about Wanakia's religion. I didn't really want to kill anyone, but I remembered my great vision. And then he finally joins the battle himself here. It's page 203, 204. But I got off my horse and rubbed the earth. There was fighting there, and Dakota cried to me, Black Elk, this is the kind of day in which you do something great. I answered, how? And I took my rifle, got on my horse, galloped up to the top of the hill. Right below me, the soldiers were shooting, and my people were calling out to me not to go down there, that there were some good shots among the soldiers. I would get killed for nothing, but I remembered my great vision. The part where the geese appeared north, flying north, and I depended upon my power, and stretching out my arms with my gun in my right hand like a goose soaring when it flies low to turn or change the weather. I made the sound of the geese. Whoop, whoop, whoop. This is great stuff. And doing this, I charged. The soldiers saw and began shooting at me, and I kept right on with my buckskin running, shot in their faces when I was near. Then swung around, rode back all the time, and the bullets were buzzing around me. I wasn't touched. I wasn't even afraid. It was like being in a dream about shooting. I dropped my arms and quit making the goose cry. This is crazy stuff, man. By now I was crazy to kill, and I said to the director, help me on my horse. I guess he had been hit by a bullet. It struck him across the belly as a deep scar on his abdomen. He shows, what's his name, the guy who's writing this. Well, that's sort of towards the end of the book. You can read the rest of it. It's great stuff. But by the end, he says he's a failure because he was not able to repair the broken duplicate people. Anyone have any questions about that? I'm sorry to rush through it like that. I'd like to take more time with you. What do you think of that book? Any good? James Lawrence. I've got some materials here on Etruscan things. I'll tell you a little bit about Lawrence. Next time we'll read through Lawrence, and the last time we'll do The Chosen. Lawrence was actually born in the 1880s in the Midlands of England. And he was really a coal miner's son. It's a really industrial area there. And he didn't like, his mother spoiled him as her favorite child. He didn't want to go in the mines and so on. It describes in some of his early work, Sons and Lovers, a famous novel. He wrote about his relationship with his wife, with his mother, his father, the mines and so on. It became a very famous novel. And finally, he got a scholarship to normal school, would be like a teacher's college. This used to be originally a teacher's college. Long Beach State was a teacher's college, school like this. And then he did fairly well, and he got a job teaching down in London area. And he describes all of this in some of his novels that he wrote. The Rainbow, Women in Love, Sons and Lovers. So he's mostly known as a novelist. This is starting getting published before the First World War, maybe 1910, 1911 period. And he made a big impression because his novels were quite exciting, interesting, very frank, very down to earth. So he quit his job as a teacher. He went back to his college, which was in the Midlands. The Midlands of England is, I don't know, a chalk. I could draw you you don't see any chalk anywhere, but here's England. And this is Scotland up here, and this is the South London down here. That's the Midlands. It's in the middle. So he went back up to his, I think he went to a school in Nottingham, which is where the forest used to be for Robin Hood. And he went back to visit his old German professor's house. I guess he had a good relationship with him. And he ran off with the German professor's wife. Don't come to my house and visit me and run off with my wife, okay? It's not what you do to your professor. She was older than him. This is the great scandal and all these crazy things that happened in his life. And she was a German, from a German aristocratic family. Her name was Frieda von Richthofen. How many have ever heard of the name von Richthofen? None of you have heard of the Baron von Richthofen? Oh my God, the time is changing. The Red Baron, you've never heard of the Red Baron?
Oh, yeah.
Who's the Red Baron? The German ace in World War I, right. That's her cousin, her first cousin. So she was, countess or whatever it was. He was called Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron. Anyway, so the English authorities were kind of suspicious of him later on. Anyway, being married to this, well, I'm not even sure they were married. It's not clear what they were, married or living. And she had 4 children by this teacher that she had been married. But he was such a captivating person that she gave up everything and left with him. And they kind of wandered the world together. They never left each other. They stayed with each other ever after. But it was a very difficult, sad situation in many ways. Because she never saw her children again until they were grown up. And the husband took it pretty badly and so on. they went to her people in Germany for a while. This was before the First World War. Then they went down into Italy and lived in Sicily for a while. And you could run around the world then because it was before the Club Mediterranean. It was before things got expensive. So if you were a bohemian, as it was called back in those days, if you wanted to live outside of society, you could do it fairly cheaply. I know, because I did it. When I got out of college, I used to live on almost nothing. And I lived quite well, actually. And I traveled for 3 or 4 years all the way to India and places, and never saw anybody on the road with me in most places that I went. Today, if you go to these places, you'd find everyone with rail cards and hostels and every other thing that you can imagine. But I think we were the first backpackers, actually. I might have been one of the first myself. I bought my backpack. I remember it was a Army surplus from the Second World War that they were selling in Edinburgh and near the train station. And some old Army backpack, American Army backpack they had been used in, maybe in the invasion. But I used to go through places in Europe and Middle East and India and places like that, and I was the only one who ever had a backpack, so maybe I was the first one, I don't know. One of the first, anyway. But you could still do it pretty cheap back in those days, and in his day even cheaper. And they did very cheaply, and he could get by, scrape by writing, which he did, and he scraped by in his novels and stuff. Well, then the First World War came, and things got tense in Italy, so he had to go back to England, and he was kind of under suspicion there, particularly with a German wife of the stature that his wife became when her cousin became so famous. And he always wanted to go to America to found a community of artists, and some American millionaires invited him to come to, New Mexico was a big artist center even back then. Who's that famous woman artist who moved to New Mexico?
Georgia O'Keeffe.
Who?
Georgia
O'Keeffe. People like her were already moving out there in the 1920s. It was probably after Lawrence, but it had already become a big, attractive place for artists. And this woman was, who invited him out was, her name was Dodge. I think she had to do with the Dodge Motor Car Company. I think, I may be wrong. Oh, here comes my cough again. I need one of your cough drops. You got a cough drop? Slip it to me, kid. Take the wrapper off, okay? Thanks. So, this Mabel Dodge Lewin invited him out. She had a big house there in Taos. Taos is T-A-O-S. It's a town above Santa Fe. It's still well known today. As much for skiing as for art and things. You can go and ski there to northern New Mexico. And actually, if you go in the hotel there, you can see J.H. Lawrence's, what is it when something is banned and painting is banned? Pornographic? Slightly pornographic pictures of him as Jesus Christ. You just have to pay just the ones that he did himself, paintings. I know, I went in and looked at the paintings in this hotel. You just tip the desk man there in the main hotel in Taos, and you can go in and see these paintings. They have a special room dedicated to them. Not that they're very inspiring particularly, but I don't think he was a particularly great artist or anything, but they're there. Anyway, who was the guy that made the movie Easy Rider?
Peter Fonda.
Not Peter Fonda, the other guy with him.
Jack Nicholson.
No, the third guy.
Dennis Hopper.
Dennis Hopper. Yeah, Dennis Hopper. No, you're good. You're good. You're good. You're helping me a lot. You've heard of Dennis Hopper, right? Well, when they all made that money from that movie, they went and bought her house in Taos, and they used it for a long time for their whatever they were doing. But you can imagine what they were doing. So, She had a real big house, and now it's kind of become a sort of center of some kind in Taos, her house. Anyway, he gave her a manuscript of Sons and Lovers, I think, a handwritten manuscript of Sons and Lovers, and she gave him some property out in the mountains out there in Taos, a little cabin in the mountains outside of Taos. As I told you before, the University of New Mexico owns it now, and that's where he's buried. He's got a tomb out there, and dedicated to him and so on. There's a huge story about it. He died in about 1930 or so in a French sanatorium. He had tuberculosis all the time. And his tuberculosis got really bad. He traveled down to Mexico. Wherever he went, he wrote novels. So, for instance, he wrote some essays called Mornings in Mexico, which are descriptions of being in Mexico. He was one of the first people who went to Mexico as someone who wanted to go to enjoy and soak in the culture. He loved the American Indian religious festivals. He describes the Hopi Indians really well, and the Pueblos. In Mexico, he wrote a novel called The Plumed Serpent about the Mexican gods. So wherever he went, he would write a novel, so basically he would survive. And when he died, if he had stayed out in these places, he probably wouldn't have died because his tuberculosis got worse, but his wife wanted to go back to Europe. And they went back and lived in Florence. And they rented this house from this Italian officer from the First World War. And it turned out that the wife, I guess, liked uniforms or whatever. Anyway, she started an affair up with the landlord guy. Because Florence, I don't think, was functioning too well in that regard with tuberculosis after a time. In fact, I met one of his girlfriends when I went to visit Taos. This woman was still living there. She's a famous painter. She told me he was impotent. She should know. She should know. Women know things like that. Guys' friends don't know it, but women soon find things like that out, I suppose. But anyway, the famous book he wrote about all this was Lady Chatterley's Lover. That broke this sex barrier in literature, magazines across the board. How many have heard of that book, Lady Chatterley's Lover? It's a famous book. As I told you, I think, in those days, when you came to America, they weren't looking for marijuana, drugs, cocaine on you. They were looking for copies of Lady Chatterley's Lover at the customs. They're always looking for something at the customs. It gives them something to do, you know. And so in Europe, if you went to Europe back when you were young, like you guys are, you would go and buy this. Someplace was for sale in Paris or someplace in England, and you would get another copy. So you put you put over it some other cover like. I don't know, Babes in Toyland or something like that. I don't know. Then you could bring it in. That was considered very brave act in those days. The point was that these things were still banned in America even into the 60s. When there were final court suits done that released all this sort of thing. And it was in the wake of those court suits that all the rest came tumbling in as well. Because through those court suits, breaking the ban on Lady Chatterley's Lover broke the ban on all the other stuff too. So Lady Chatterley's Lover was the key, and this was really he was writing about himself. If you know the story, it's about a woman, English aristocrat, married to a crippled person in a wheelchair who had been wounded in World War I. And she takes up with the gamekeeper in the garden an affair. She has an affair with the guy gamekeeper in the garden. Very shocking for England. That's about class, different classes, you know, upper class, hobnobbing with lower class. And this is his life. He's both the gamekeeper and the crippled man in the wheelchair. He's both people, because later on he's the man in the, basically in the wheelchair being cuckolded by someone else as well. They used to use that word cuckolded, if you don't know. means when someone else is having something to do with your wife. So that's a famous novel, but of course it's famous for its sex scenes because it gets into the mind of the woman, Lady Chatterley, and describes her sexual feelings. If I could be crude, will you allow me? During orgasm, okay? Sorry. And delete that word, put a bleep there. In any case, that was, for that period, that was like crazy. That was 1920s, and that was just not done. Not heard of. I guess for you guys today, it's pretty innocent stuff, huh? It was not done. So these are real historical breakthroughs. So that's what he's really known for. It's not his best novel. What we have here, what I want to read with you, certainly next time, if not this time a bit, if I can get into it all. There's many different versions of this book. I don't know who's got what, but I have this one. There's a new one out. I don't know if you have the sketches or that one, James Lawrence in Italy. You see, they had one out just Etruscan places, but for some reason they canceled it. And this was a really good edition. They had it out until the last term, and it's got pictures and everything in it of the tombs that he visits. So, in fact, they've gone back to just this old collection here, and I apologize for not having a, publishers changed the volume again for some reason. Maybe they lost the license to it. I don't know what happened. In any event, this was the one we used last term, and now we don't have it anymore. We just have D.H. Lawrence in Italy, which is just a collection of part of several other essays. It's still in there. But in the book I had, it was a single volume. Now they've collapsed it down, and it's not as impressive. All the essays in that book are good, by the way. One, Sea in Sardinia, is about his life when he was living in Sicily before he went to America. But I forget what the other one is in that. What's the other one in that collection? Sea in Sardinia and...
Twilight in England.
Yeah, I don't remember what that was about. To me, his prose is better than his novels. His novels to me are actually corny in the end. I find most novels to be cheesy and corny in the end. And so his prose is really good. And this Etruscan places, you say, well, why would Etruscan places be interesting? He penetrates the mind of early primitive religious mind in a way that no one else that I've ever read was able to do. He obviously felt a kinship with it. And in doing so, he gets into the whole thing of his attitude towards sexuality and ecology and all the things that have since become so important to many of us in the spiritual religious field. So I think he's a forerunner in this, and this is one of the best expressions of it. So I like to read things that are worth something. And this is really worth something when you read it. And you learn something as well. I'm just going to go to the first couple of paragraphs and I'll let you go. The Etruscans. He wrote this when he went back to Italy. At the time, he just knocked this off in 1926, about 5 years before he died. As everyone knows, were the people who occupied the middle of Italy in early Roman days, and whom the Romans, in their usual neighborly fashion, wiped out entirely in order to make room for Rome with a very big R. That is a great first sentence. I don't know if you know about writing or know how to write or can grasp writing. And he says it all in that sentence, and says it so well, but with a sense of humor. They couldn't have wiped them all out. There were too many of them for that. But they did wipe out the Etruscan existence as a nation, as a people. However, this seems to be the inevitable result of expansion with a big E, which is the sole raison d'etre of people like the Romans. So just to start on the first sentence there, to go back, Does he like the Romans? No. What's their problem? They're expansionists, they're violent, they're brutal, they wipe people out, and they're not neighborly. To make room for Rome with a very big heart. Is he going to like the Etruscans? Yes. He thinks they're gentle, delicate, fine, refined, absolutely sensitive people. And the Romans are insensitive. I like this because, you know, we, in our history classes, in our movies, we glorify these places like Rome. You know, we have movies like The Gladiator, and we see the soldiers marching down the Forum, and the Roman soldiers marching, and you know, we see the great architectural things that they built, and we're awed and impressed, and our teachers tell us about how the Roman Empire did that, and that, and that, and that, and that. And they never tell us that this Roman Empire was a brutal, monstrous, you know, repressive, horrendous place where, you know, people were, as he will describe it here, treated in the way they were treated, vast dead pits for slaves and every other sort of thing. And, you know, I've studied the Roman situation in Palestine and England and other places. I mean, these people, when they went to work, they wiped people out, like literally wiped people out, just like Lawrence had said. And he's one of the first people that you come upon who's really willing to say it. And he's not a historian. He's a thinker and a novelist and a spiritual person. So he just says what he thinks. And he doesn't mess around and beat around the bush. So he says it in that how the Romans, in their usually neighborly fashion, wiped out in order to make room for Rome. He could have stopped there, but he doesn't. Rome with a very big R. It's great writing. See you next time.
Please don't pass it in class.
The thing says that there's a sacred hoop that symbolizes imagination. That it has to have a sacred hoop to be healthy. I don't really know what he means by it myself.